Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me here this afternoon. My name is Abbey, and I'm a yogi and Salesforce engineer, creator of my personal brand of training, Consider Volunteering. Today, I'm here to share a Salesforce conversation with you. So, I end my week here on Twitch with a conversation about Salesforce, is what I do for a living. I'm a 5-time certified admin. I've been developing in Salesforce for 5 years now. And I'm here to share some community with you and talk about some questions from the Trailblazer community, giving you insight into how I would think about these particular issues and questions based off of my 5 years of experience in Salesforce. So, to get us started, let's transition to our first question. Our first question today reads, how can I recreate the search relationship field lead contact person, which is already present on events, even on a custom object? The detail of the question includes, how can I recreate the search relationship field, which is already present on events, even on a custom object? I'm currently able to create a search relationship field that is only linked to either lead or the contact, but not both at the same time. So I picked this question today because, one, I love activities. Activities are fantastic, right? All of these pieces that remind us what on earth do we need to do day to day in our businesses. So we often leverage activities, right? Tasks, events, to keep us in line each day with what we would need to do. And something that's very special about activities is the multi-lookup relationship field that exists there. So once getting used to activities, right, come in 3 forms nowadays. Activities. Hi, buddy. I think my dogs have joined me. Hello. I'm trying to work here, buddy. Thank you. Your smile is very nice. Oh, so activities, right? Activities help us keep track of our work within the environment. And so we often leverage list views to see our tasks, our list of tasks. Get out of here, buddy. It's me. So we often leverage a list of tasks to keep track of what we need to do day to day. And what's very specific about tasks is multi-lookup relationships on tasks. So right, as I was mentioning, they come in 3 forms of activities. We have a task, which is just like a to-do item. We have an event, which often is integrated with our email systems to show our meetings throughout the day, Zoom, Gmail, Outlook, those email providers. And then finally, most recently, they've introduced an email object that kind of rolls up into activities. So previously we had to report on emails through activity reporting, but now since they've extended inbox licenses and enhanced emails and lightning email templates, we now have a specific object to hold emails within the activity object. So they come in 3 forms, but something very specific about an activity is that it can be related to multiple objects. Since we can list an activity on practically every object, right? When we create a custom object, it allows us to check the box of, is our activities allowed, right? Reporting allowed, searching allowed. When we create custom objects, we enable the ability to have activities related to them, but we can relate that activity to any object, right? When the who and what ID are really specific to the activity object, and we don't have the option to create similar multi-lookup fields on other objects. It's only specific to activities. We cannot touch that anywhere else. But it is very unique to that object because when we go into our who and our what IDs, so the who ID is what attaches it to a person. So each activity is related to a who. So that comes in the form of our leads or our contacts. It can also show person accounts. So that is my caveat to our WhoId is it can reference leads, contacts, as well as our person accounts, because a person account straddles the account and contact object, can kind of act as both. So our WhoId is very specific, so we can look up who kind of objects, leads, contacts, person accounts. And then our WhatId can be attached to any object within our environment. So standard objects, custom objects, the full gamut. We can attach one activity to any of those. So when we go to the WhatId, we select which objects we're looking for, and then we can go relate it to that object. So I'd select accounts, and then which record within the accounts I'd want to tie it to. So those are really fun ways that are very specific around our activity object that we don't have access everywhere else. So it is pretty frustrating when you maybe want that functionality on another object. It's just we can't use it. But one of my favorite things to do is find creative ways to apply maybe this particular functionality when we're looking to have it on a custom object. Is there a way we couldn't use a task to maybe do something similar? Or I myself really enjoy using campaigns to help us tag these multiple objects along the way, relate them to an idea, something that we want to track. I would create a campaign for that and then tie it to my objects, because that's how I could roll it up to a lead and a contact in kind of that same way. So I've definitely used campaigns to help me out with this particular idea. So I wish I had a better answer for this trailblazer, but I thought it was a really good kind of point to make if you're new to Salesforce or haven't configured on top of the activity object before. It can be a bit frustrating because it's unique in its own way. So writing automation related to activities, like automatically creating events based off something, it just has some unique attributes to it that we might not think of every day. So we have a good time with our activity object and how we relate it to many objects. But in this case, if we wanted to have either, for example, I've used junction objects many times to give us kind of this master detail, one to many, many to many relationships. And in those cases, right, when it could be a lead or a contact, or when it's transferring over the conversion process, we have to create custom configuration for those two lookups to transfer the data upon conversion. So it is kind of custom, a little pain in the butt, but my suggestion to you is maybe look into what a campaign might be able to help you out with if it's more of an idea that we want to attach to our leads and our contacts. Campaigns could be a great way to do that. So that was the first question I wanted to talk about today, are multiple lookups that are specific to our activity objects. The second question I've prepared for today is, should I create a second process? The detail of the question reads, hi, I'm working on an assignment and I have 2 tasks I need to complete using Process Builder. 1, update the contact first name field to test when a change is made to the field. 2, set account name equals contact ID. The account name should be changed to the contact ID when you update a contact. My question is, can this be completed under one process? Or would it be best to create 2 separate processes for the account and contact object? So of course, I wanted to talk about this particular automation question today because it gives me an opportunity to talk about flows. So I'm biased. I love flows. I've been writing a lot of them recently. I find them super helpful. And now that I've started to understand coding and variables to a larger extent, I've had greater success writing flows, making them work in an efficient way. Plus, as we've just heard here recently in the past few days, we've got confirmation that Salesforce has a desire to sunset workflow rules and process builders. Granted, there's no time frame on that, and I anticipate it being a long, long time before Salesforce is able to sunset those things. But we know flow is the future. flow was the future and now flow is the present. So we've really got to start flexing our muscles around how can we leverage flows to write our automation nowadays instead of relying on our friends, process builders, and workflow rules. From what I understand, flow is add complete parity with process builders and workflow rules, maybe one or two things, but we are pretty close. And it's even pushing that envelope. Like I myself am really excited about asynchronous jobs or scheduled paths within flows. Really help with our mixed DML, give us a lot closer to that feel of code, but able to be touched by an admin. So how exciting. In this particular case, right, try using a flow just for fun. But, right, the crux of the question is, can we use one process to trigger both of these events, or should we use separate triggers? So first, what I'd like to cover is how do we think of triggers within our automation? How on earth do we decide, right, where do we start our trigger? How do I determine the best place to put it for the most efficient automation that we can create? So when we're assessing the description of this question, I want to update the contact first name to test. So right, first name to test when a change is made to that field. Set account name to the contact ID, and the account name should be changed to the contact ID when you update a contact. So, okay. So our first trigger is we're updating the contact first name based off a change of the same field. So when the contact name is changed, we want to append something to it to let the users know that it was manually adjusted. The second criteria is we'd like to update the related account with a particular data point from our contact when the contact is updated. So I'm not too sure. What would be really helpful in this case is what is the business process this is supporting? That could really help us assess if this is the best way forward. But since we're missing that kind of detailed information here, we'd really need to rely on just the basis of these triggered fields. And this particular question already had beautiful answers to it, so I don't have much to add here, but both of the other trailblazers were talking about that this is accomplishable in a process builder with one trigger. I agree that it would also be possible in one flow with one trigger, since as we've read this, both of the triggers come from the contact object. Update the contact name when the contact name is changed, update a piece of data on the related account when the contact is changed. So since each of those end with when the contact is changed, we could use one flow, contact flow, or process builder to update both of these pieces of information. So overall, that is my answer. One flow to this particular trigger, right? Based off that contact object. We would create our pivot points or decisions when those particular data points are updated, and then update our specific contact and account as necessary. The last thing I want to mention related to this question is this idea of one flow per object, one piece of automation per object. So I've been developing in Salesforce for 5 years, which, where's the time gone? Felt like I just started yesterday. And when I first started, there definitely wasn't this as robust of a flow builder as there is today. So that has definitely changed here drastically within the past few years, which is amazing and has really made it much more accessible than it has been previously. But there was this concept within the development community that there only should be one trigger per object. So 1 trigger per object. Don't ask me where all of this comes from. One day I will understand. But how I understood it when I was first starting out is that we needed to have 1 trigger per object because that prevented us from the infinite loop, or where our evaluations never end. This kind of reciprocal idea through the process where we can loop and loop on our own automation, because if we have more than 1 trigger, we can't control the order of execution. While if we have 1 trigger, we can specify the order in which things are executed. So that was kind of the theme of Salesforce development when I first started in the community. But since then, things have kind of changed. So that concept definitely trickled down into our ideas of process builders and flows. We should have 1 per object, 1 for accounts, 1 for contacts, 1 for opportunities. We should have 1 piece of automation type per object. That way we can ensure our order of execution. But I believe that has changed over time. We don't necessarily have to think that way anymore. I think things have started to ease up and morph over time so that 1 trigger per object is not so strict anymore. What I kind of understand where the thoughts are kind of going is maybe more of this functional based trigger methodology, right? Sub-flows, sub-triggers, where we could package 1 group of functionality, like let's say creating a case, and reuse that over and over again within our multiple objects. So over time, I found that we repeat things at different parts of the process. So we could write our automation in a smaller chunk and then reference that same chunk to kind of help us over time be more specific about reusing that, so we don't have to create the same thing over and over again in each of our different locations. So I think that's kind of a really interesting idea for our future, right? How I feel like it started out was first, right, it was 1 trigger per object, and then it was like 1 trigger per object in each context. So when I mention context, I'm talking about like the before flow, after flow, create, update, delete, right? There's some of these contexts that we specify when we create a trigger. So we'd start with 1 per object, and then we were like, oh, maybe that's a little too restrictive because we have these kind of high level contexts before, after, create, update, delete that could be unique enough to have their own trigger, right? Because an update is not going to run on create and a create is not going to run on delete. So we can kind of feel pretty comfortable sparsing those things out. So I feel like things morphed into that fashion, and then that kind of bled into process builders and flows where we'd have 1 per object, but then per context once they allowed us to create before trigger flows. And now I'm like, even that is kind of ship sailed, and they really want us to start thinking about ways where we can package a piece of functionality and reuse it over time. Plus, with this kind of additional features of Flow Orchestrator, we're getting that control back once we break down our flows into curating how we want them to execute with Flow Orchestrator. So I think I like kind of the flexibility and creativity that this is introducing into these automation concepts. But how fun, all of the places that my mind can go based off this 1 prompt of, should this be 1 process or 2? My mind goes to a lot of places here within the Salesforce community of how you could address this problem. Excellent. And then last but not least, what I wanted to cover, I didn't really find a good 3rd question, but what I did want to mention is something that I've learned about recently. Something I've learned about recently is a website form here. So I've been working in Experience Cloud a lot over the last 6 months or so. I hadn't really done much besides surface level text formatting on an Experience Cloud site, but now I'm starting to kind of understand it and realize that this is maybe a different way of thinking about Salesforce because it's more of in the web development space than it is in the database space. So what I found recently from the last winter 22 release readiness live sessions is that they have a whole help site just for that. So outside of Trailhead, because I've done every Trailhead there is on Experience Cloud and just feel like, what am I missing? They have their own learnexperiencecloud.com. So if you've been struggling to learn Experience Cloud, looking for more information, I found this learnexperiencecloud.com a really great place to go. From what I understand, it's built on top of an Experience Cloud site. So if you ever need an example, just pull up this and be like, this is what you can do with an Experience Cloud site. And just found this a really great resource of like trying to learn what's next in Experience Cloud. How on earth do I leverage this web development tool? How do I create a site, a website for people to leverage and access our Salesforce data? And Trailhead was great to a certain extent, but this has really helped me solidify which way forward. So it has specific curated paths through here to help us learn and get our fingers dirty into what is possible in an Experience Cloud site. So if you've been struggling to learn the ins and outs of Experience Cloud like I have, learnexperiencecloud.com is where they've been putting some good tips and tricks in here to help us along the way. So give this resource a try. It's been super helpful to me because one day I know Salesforce will give us a beautiful, beautiful builder to finish out our Experience Cloud sites like they do in Flow Builder and Sales Cadences. I look forward to the day where that is the answer they have for us. But until then, this is the gem of a resource that I found. LearnExperiencecloud.com has really been a great help solidifying my way forward. So let me know what you think. Thank you for hearing me out today. I greatly appreciate you joining me. I will continue to work on how on earth do I do all of these online like sessions, how I can improve upon the way in which I have these conversations around Salesforce. We just need to find this way to have community in our new virtual world on a sustainable method. So here I am trying to share the knowledge that I have, and I look forward to the day where we have more and more questions to be able to address live so we can have deeper conversations around the questions I find intriguing in our Salesforce community. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you have a great evening. With love, Namaste.